Sound and fury, immigrants and their advocates erupt as the Miami-Dade Commission backs the mayor and the president on sanctuary cities.
Desperation and danger. Venezuela on the brink, and a record number of asylum seekers headed here.
This is a state I truly love. This is a state where we all had great victory together. Thank you.
Back in Florida, the president stages a campaign rally after just 30 days in office. We'll take it to the roundtable.
Good morning. So great to have you with us as usual, as once again, South Florida is the center of national news spotlight for a few reasons. And
one reason is the vote on Friday by the Miami-Dade Commission to back the mayor's decision to comply with the president's executive order on sanctuary cities. The decision came after a marathon public hearing where the great majority of speakers opposed the mayor's decision to hold undocumented jail inmates wanted by ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
They stormed out of the meeting, opposed to the detention policy in a community where more than half the residents were born in another country. They're also afraid local police will be enlisted as immigration agents, resulting in stepped-up deportations that break up families. And that is where we begin today with Freddie Ramirez, who is the Assistant Director of the Miami-Dade Police Department, a department intent on convincing the immigrant communities to trust officers, not fear them. And we so appreciate you coming in today.
Good morning. We are so glad you're here. So does the Miami-Dade Police Department seek to be, want to be, have any interest in being agents for immigration enforcement?
Absolutely not. That's not our mission in our department. We're here to serve the community no matter who you are, no matter what your status is. It doesn't mean anything to us. We're here to protect and serve. Those are our core values, and that's what we stick to. Regardless of the legal residency status of whomever you encounter. Regardless.
You know, we've heard that message so often throughout the proceedings as the commission look at the detention policy. We've heard it from the director, we've heard it from the mayor, but in a practical sense, when your officers are on the street, crime fighting, be it for a major crime or a traffic stop, what are the practical procedures of stopping somebody who knows as soon as they're taken into custody, they're on the radar?
Well, what I could tell you is I've done this job for 22 years, and all my career I've never asked anyone for their papers. We don't do that. That's not what we do. When we serve the community, be it a call for service, be it domestic violence, a battery call, or a regular citizen contact, we don't ask you for your paper, and the community doesn't need to worry about that.
Right, from you. And I think what you hear in the community is we'll trust our local police officers, but as soon as we're put in that system, they may not know our status, but we're in there, and who knows what will happen. And there's such a fear and uncertainty where it goes from there. How do you get around that?
Well, it's through communication and explaining our processes. If we meet with you and it turns into an arrest situation, nothing to do with your immigration status, and you're transported to our Miami-Dade Correction Facility, that is dealt with there for the 48-hour retainer. That will be dealt with corrections. As far as your contact with the police, and our process has nothing to do with your immigration status. Our focus is on the matter at hand, and that's it. And we will explain that to you. If you have that question, don't be afraid to ask that to us, because we'll explain it to you. We're there for the reason that got us there, whatever that incident may be it a crime. That's why we're worried that people won't call when they're victims of domestic violence or robberies, because they feel that we're going to show up there to somehow violate their immigration status. That is not correct. We will not.
Well, on Friday, at the 4-hour-long public hearing on the question of detention, in fact, people like Cheryl Little from American Immigrant Justice, a number of other advocates for refugees and immigrants, legal and not legal, said their clients are petrified. They are afraid to go out, to send kids to school in some instances. What is your message to both the advocates and to the people they're talking about?
Not to fear the police. The Miami-Dade Police Department or any agency that serves Miami-Dade County. We're not there to address your immigration status. We're here to protect and serve regardless. And when people start sharing that type of information around the community, it makes it hard for us because we're not strong unless the community is with us. And we have a strong relationship with the community, and we'll get stronger to ensure that we put out those rumors that are out there like that.
We should point out that we obviously don't have a representative from the Broward Sheriff's Office or Fort Lauderdale Police, but generally speaking, as far as you know, their policies are the same. They are not, don't want to be enforcers of immigration law.
Exactly. It's like the mayor says, that's the federal government's job. We don't do that. We're local law enforcement. We protect and serve. That's what we do.
You know, the president is, I think it was yesterday, he said, and before, he's going to be coming out with a new immigration executive order, probably this week. And there are components of his orders that seem to indicate that at some point in the future, he wants to deputize local law enforcers as immigration agents. Looking at how the commission voted this week to support any policy not to be known as a sanctuary city, not to jeopardize federal funding, if that comes to pass, then what?
Like I said, the mayor, the director of the Miami-Dade Police Department, Juan Perez, stated, and I state as the assistant director, we will not enforce those immigration laws. We are not. In fact, I think in the current form of that document said the consent of the police department to do that we would volunteer with that, and we're not.
Yeah. So you, just to follow up, this department is going to not do a directive that might come down from the federal government in any way possible.
I don't think the federal, my opinion is, you know, we're part of the major city chiefs, you know, the Florida sheriffs, and these topics have been discussed, and for the majority of those departments, they agree that local law enforcement shouldn't be involved in those things because of the trust with the community. It will inhibit, like we're hearing right now, that hysteria, like to be afraid of us. And no, I mean, and that's our director, Juan Perez's stance. We're not going to do that. It's going to be counterproductive for us.
Assistant Director, not to put too fine a point on it, but currently your department, every local police department in South Florida cooperates with DEA on some drug investigations. There's a joint terrorism task force. So it's not as if there is a relationship between local law enforcement and federal law enforcement.
We have a strong relationship in terms of fighting crime, dealing with violent criminals, even with ICE, dealing with the gang raids and human trafficking and things like that. We're brothers and sisters with the federal government and the law enforcement community. But now when we step out of the bounds into the civil arena, that's a different story.
You know, I wonder if you have any kind of either personal experience or you've heard some of your officers who have encountered exactly what you're afraid of. Is that happening now on the ground? Do you have any specific anecdotes?
As of right now, from what I'm being told through my chain of command, we haven't experienced that, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to amp up our connection with the migrant community, especially in the South District, in the Redlands. You know, I started off in Color Ridge District. I worked Ag Patrol, so I know how important it is to have that trust and bond with the migrant community. You know, it's very important.
So you're not seeing that now?
Not right now, and we'll continue to monitor that. But the moment if we do sense that, we'll address it because we get in front of those things. And I feel that the Miami-Dade Police Department has a strong connection with the community, and it's earned, and we work it every day. We don't take it for granted.
And you don't want, whatever the commission voted 9-3 on Friday, doesn't change anything about the bond that you want between the department and all of the community.
That is correct. We're brothers and sisters together.
I have one more question for you. Coming from people that I've heard on Friday who are very supportive of this mayor's directive and supportive of local cooperation in detaining criminals in jail for federal agents. And what do you say to those people who look at the law and feel like they want their law enforcement officers to enforce all laws and that illegal immigration is illegal immigration? There are people who feel very strongly about that.
And I respect that, but there are also government agencies that handle that. And there's different levels of law enforcement that deal with that arena. We are protect and serve. We serve the community as a whole, regardless. And that's our bond. That's our bond, and we're not going to break that bond.
A good point on which to end. And on this Sunday morning, holiday weekend, we're really glad, Freddie Ramirez, that you came in. Thank you. Glad you brought your wife. Nice to meet her.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Next up, a crisis a continent away with consequences felt right here in South Florida. Venezuela on the brink of economic and social collapse.
Two South Florida cities, Doral and Miami-Dade and Weston and Broward, are home to the largest Venezuelan exile communities in the U.S.
Which makes the crisis there particularly important to South Florida. This week, one of our colleagues at ABC News documented the country's descent into economic and social chaos, a shortage of basic supplies, staggering inflation, a backlash in the streets against the Nicolas Maduro government, and that government's crackdown on speech and liberties. Frank Mora is the director of the Latin American and Caribbean Studies Center at Florida International University and has served as Deputy Secretary for Defense for the Western Hemisphere under President Obama. Elena Poleo is a Venezuelan-American journalist who runs her own strategic communication firm in Miami. And welcome both.
We are so glad you came in.
Thank you.
Dr. Mora, we have said on this program, other media as well, for weeks, for months, that the situation in Venezuela is dire, but we continue to have to say that. How bad is it?
Yeah, I also say, it's reached bottom and it keeps digging down even further.
Right.
I think we have to start from the premise that now we have a failed state, a dictatorship that is really governing a failed state. And I think that distinction is important, Michael, because legally speaking within the Western Hemisphere, countries in the Western Hemisphere can invoke a treaty that really puts enormous or can put enormous pressure on the Venezuelan government.
Through the OAS?
Through the OAS, known as the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Now, there's not been any political will among Venezuela's neighbors to do that, but I think it's important to start thinking of Venezuela in those terms because the situation is so polarized that I really don't see a way out of this either legally or through dialogue at the moment. And I fear that we might find a sort of Tunisian situation where a vegetable or vendor sort of burned himself up. We're waiting for that spark that could be produced and triggered in Venezuela.
Just to put some numbers on this, the reports this week, 82% of Venezuelans now live in poverty. More than half, 52%, in extreme poverty. Helena, this is sort of the country that used to be the oil-rich beauty queen capital of the world. And as we talk, let's look at some of the video that reporter Matt Gutman with ABC News brought out this week of people protesting. We think of dictatorship, socialist governments. We don't think of people so freely protesting. How is that happening there?
Well, they're freely protesting up to a point. They do get thrown in jail and they get shot at. So I don't know that you can say that they're freely protesting. The government is smart in the sense that they allow a certain amount of protesting so that they can mask as a democratic government. And the truth is that they are not, because they do throw these students in jail. These people end up in jail. We have two major mayors that are in jail, Leopoldo Lopez, who used to be mayor, and then Antonio Ledesma. He's actually mayor now, and he's been in jail for 2 years, and Leopoldo Lopez on his 3rd year. So it's not, you cannot say that they are protesting freely. It's really not accurate.
And it's just worth it to say that Matt Gutman was actually, and his crew were actually detained for a few days.
So you can't really say that.
And the government did throw out CNN in Espanol, and they've...
And NTN 24. So CNN is actually the second station that they throw out. And I'd like to point out, as to free press, most of the TV stations are all controlled by the government one way or another. My family's newspaper and magazine we're in the middle of a lawsuit against PDVSA. They sued us for reprinting basically a Bloomberg cable. So there is no free press.
PDVSA, we should point out, is the state-owned and run oil magnate.
So it's the same thing as the government suing us.
Yeah. Well, this week, Frank, I thought there was a very good moment in Washington where the wife of Leopoldo Lopez, the opposition leader who's been in jail for what?
3 years so far.
Yeah, she appeared at the White House. There was a photo that the president tweeted out, and he essentially said freedom for Leopoldo Lopez and other opponents. I guess the question is, he has to back that up with some action.
Yeah,
What's he going to do?
Backing up, President Obama essentially enacted what's known as the Kingpin list, which is sort of a blacklist where people accused of corruption and human rights are put on this list and sanctioned economically. There were about 6 people on this list. Right. President Trump has added an additional person. The vice president of Venezuela is now on this list.
Tarek
al-Assami, who is, exceedingly corrupt and probably ties to other non-state actors. And so there is, I hope, a movement on the part of President Trump. But more importantly, I think it's Venezuela's neighbors. that need to come up to bat and start putting pressure. It can't be the United States. It can't just be the United States. It could be counterproductive.
Well,
so it's important for Colombia.
Excuse me. If it's the United States, then Maduro can say, oh, we're being pressured by the United States, and the big, ugly, imperialist nation from the north is trying to dictate our future.
Which is exactly what he does. And in fact, when the day after Lillian Tintori, Leopoldo Lopez's wife, met with Trump and Senator Marco Rubio, the Supreme Court ratified his being in jail for 14 years. That is the time that he is supposed to be in jail. So now his only chance.
And he did not commit any violent
No,
act.
absolutely
He simply
not.
stood up in public and opposed the
And
Maduro
protested.
regime. And protested.
So therefore, he has been put in jail for 14 years in solitary confinement in a military jail. This is, and when I talk about solitary confinement, I'm talking about one cell with an empty tower. Complete solitary confinement.
You know, Roger Noriega, who was the former Assistant Secretary of State under George W. Bush, he had said this week, I read it to a reporter, I read it somewhere this week, that the list you were talking about, the Obama administration specifically backed off sanctions in Venezuela to pressure the opposition groups to negotiate with the government. Would you react to that?
I think that's initially correct. I don't think backing off, but all the paperwork was ready to put al-Assimi on the list. The administration pushed back in the hope that that dialogue that was ongoing and that was supported by the Vatican and others would gain traction. It did not. President Obama left office. And now I think President Trump is trying to up the ramping, we hope, because we don't know what the follow-up will be. Ultimately, it cannot be just the United States. This is important. It has to be Venezuela's neighbors and the international community, because the Venezuelan government is not going to cede any space.
So because politics and the social fabric are so intertwined as we see, is this, what, nothing less than regime change to help the Venezuelan people?
Well, I mean, what we're seeing is, I think he couldn't have said it better. I mean, Frank, that we need to see the countries that surround Venezuela really step up to the plate. Anything that the U.S. does will be seen as, aggression, and they will use that for their own propaganda. So, and they've already been using it. In fact, the day after he was placed in this kingpin list, and we should point out that Tarek al-Assami has many properties in South Florida that have been seized, millions of dollars, the day after they were dancing on national television because they were saying, look at how they're hurting us and we're dancing. So it has to be the neighbors, absolutely.
And I don't know Mr. al-Assami, he says he's innocent. He is, I saw the Herald reported the other day, a member of the Doral National Golf Club Resort out here. And how ironic that in a community full of Venezuelans, that this guy who is accused of being a narco trafficker and ties to Hezbollah, can come here for the weekend, stay in a multi-million-dollar condo, and go play golf out in Doral.
He's not the only one either.
That's right.
And in fact, there is a big movement to identify these Venezuelans that have stolen money from the country, and he's not the only one.
A movement
by local Venezuelans here to identify.
Yeah, Frank, not to put too fine a point on it, but would you just speak to the fact that it's not in the interest of the United States or our neighbors to the south in Latin America, Central America, to have a failed state? I mean, the ramifications are really dangerous.
We're seeing already, you see, if you look at the Venezuelan-Colombian border, it's really an ungoverned space. And you see Venezuelans leaving the country. The traffic of all kinds of things, licit and illicit on the traffic, is creating a security problem for Colombia.
Right.
On the other side, you have a problem with Guyana on a number of issues having to do with oil. So that, in a sense, that failed state or that weak state, I think will create repercussions beyond. For example, the Caribbean countries who depend on Venezuelan oil, who receive Venezuelan oil, if that's closed off because Venezuela just simply can't do it, it creates an economic, political crisis on those islands.
Or huge consequences here for what happens in Venezuela, South Florida, throughout the Caribbean and Latin America. Helen, Elena, permiso. Thank you for coming in, Dr. Frank North. Thank you.
Great to see you.
Sure.
After the break, we take this and so much more to the Powerhouse Roundtable. Stay with us. As usual, we have a lot to talk about on today's roundtable, and we have a great roundtable for you, so let's get right to some introductions. H.T. Smith is a well-known attorney, community activist, and law professor at Florida International University.
Is he ever? And a legal legend. Here's another one, Mary Lee Cancio, Miami-based attorney, active in the state Republican Party, and we are glad to welcome back Patricia Mazzei, the lead political reporter for the Miami Herald. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Icon, legal icon,
Legal
I believe
icon.
is what it was.
I was there for that award. Patty, you've been very busy this week. You and a colleague were down there, Doug Hanks, I believe, were at Miami-Dade County Hall for that marathon public hearing, which resulted in that 9-3 vote to back the mayor. Did the size of that winning margin surprise you, or?
You know, I
think
think that was the count we kind of had it going into the meeting. No minds were changed from what I could tell, even though we had about 150 people speak and only a handful supported the mayor, and most were there to speak against the policy. It's like they were talking different conversations, right? They were talking past each other. People were there to make an emotional, moral appeal about the county's identity as an immigrant city, and the commissioners were thinking they were making a very narrow decision about money. And so I'm not sure they were having the same conversation.
Well, they actually were making a narrower, I don't know about money, but they were making a very specific decision. Mary Lee, it seems like not only this decision, but every conversation about every specific policy that has to do with immigration is sort of conflated into the larger national crackdown on illegal immigrants. And that kind of is what I was hearing on Friday.
I find it very unfortunate and unfair with Mayor Jimenez in particular. He's doing his job, and the commission understands that. He's an immigrant as well. This is a community of immigrants, but this is not about whether you like immigrants, sympathize with immigrants. This is about following the law. Someone that obeys the law and doesn't go to jail doesn't have to worry about this. Just like we heard in the previous segment, the police is not going to go after anybody on the streets. This is very limited. And after 48 hours, if ICE doesn't send anyone to pick them up, you know, they go about their business, just like it was before 2013.
Yeah.
Right. But HT, you know, I think part of the issue that Patty and Glenna, I have reported on, is that Mayor Jimenez said he would comply with the president's order within 24 hours, even less, of the president issuing it. It was part of what many objected to, was the timing of how he did it.
Right, without any input from the community, without any consultation with the commission. I think,
or maybe with the county attorney, as far as we know.
Definitely with the county attorney.
It's unclear if Miami-Dade would have even been affected.
Right,
by
right.
this
But I think
order.
Mary Lee is right in terms of him doing his job. I think the more effective and honest argument is that this is a unfunded mandate. The federal government is saying to the people of Dade County, we demand that you hold these people, demand at the penalty of we not giving you money you're entitled to, from 2 to 5 days. For instance, if they had asked for someone Wednesday, you owe them Thursday, Friday, the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. Monday is a holiday, it's 5 days. You taxpayers feed them. You taxpayers provide dental care. You taxpayers provide medical care, as well as prescription drugs. And you pay it, and we're not going to refund you.
That already happens when
But that
someone
was
goes
the
to
argument
jail.
in the first place for overturning it.
But we will, yeah, that happens, but it wouldn't happen the extended period of time that the government is required. So the federal government is asking us to hold them longer to pay for all of those things. Okay, fine, but you pay us back. The taxpayers, me, you, and Patty.
Well, let me just say that we all heard the public defender say on Friday that his attorneys are now advising their clients who might be undocumented, do not bond out, because you may end up at Chrome Detention Center, which goes to the same cost.
Well, and he also said when this policy was what the county did before 2014, that it was not just affecting undocumented people who are in jail, it was affecting lawful permanent residents and asylum seekers who were getting caught up in ICE processes. And then, even though they were legally in the country, they were having to go through judicial proceedings in immigration court. So it was, you know, it might have unintended consequences. And to Michael's point, the mayor made a decision that was hasty, that was not clear if the county would have been affected, apparently not really consulting with the county attorney, who later had to say, oh, by the way, the commission needs to vote on this. By the way, you can't do it by yourself. And so I think the way it played out was unexpected for the mayor's staff, and he was on vacation in Orlando and he signed off on it. They probably don't like to hear that, but it was a big deal because they didn't realize that it was going to be a big emotional debate that was going to go to the hearts of a lot of people.
But sympathy will not win this debate. Mary Lee said it correctly. The mayor is doing his job, and that's why I think we have to respond to the mayor's argument with the counter argument. You said it's a financial matter? Fine. The finances, this is a federal unfunded mandate.
Well, the mayor pointed out on Friday, as he had before, he did on this program a couple of weeks ago, that at stake was in the vicinity of $350 million in federal grants, monies coming here, plus maybe billions for future road projects. Although, Mary Lee, you are the attorney, I am not, but there have been, I've seen, court decisions that say that the federal government cannot use coercion of that kind to prevent monies coming. But on the other hand, Donald Trump, like other presidents, you reward your friends, you punish their enemies, and he liked what Carlos Jimenez did.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And what I have to say is that Miami-Dade County was never a sanctuary county. And I think it's important to note that following the law, there's nothing wrong with that. My concern is the emotional well-being of a lot of illegal immigrants in our community that are very scared and very anxious. And I think it's irresponsible to fuel that, because we got to tell them, just like Officer Ramirez said earlier, the police is not going to arrest you unless you commit a crime. If you need help, call them. I think it's important to keep sending that message out to the community.
Right.
You know, we need to turn to the president back in our part of the state again. Right now, as we speak.
Can you blame him? The weather's so much nicer.
Well, no.
And he carried Florida. He won
and
Florida.
He carried Florida. And
the governor's his friend.
And yesterday, he was in Melbourne doing some campaigning, it looked like, instead of governing. That's not a political statement.
It was a weekend.
But here's my question. He's filed for re-election. Donald Trump's filed for re-election. By all accounts, by his account, he was campaigning yesterday in Melbourne. That's what he was doing. Is that an appropriate use of his time right now?
Why not? As he said, life is a campaign.
You can't answer a question with a question.
Why not? I think I loved it. All his supporters over there, 9,000 of them inside that airport, thousands more waiting outside. He is out there doing a campaign in support of his presidency. He feels he's at war with some of the media, and he's out there to promote his own agenda. That's one of the ways of doing it. More power to him. He has a lot of supporters out there that agree with what he's doing.
And I'm not surprised that Mary Lee and all of his supporters are giddy about seeing him on the campaign trail doing what he does best, talking. But the rest of us would like to see him in Washington doing what he was elected to do. Governing. And that's governing.
You had no problem with Obama was playing golf on a Saturday. This is a weekend where I don't think anyone's going to work harder than President Trump.
In Obama's first 30 days, he passed a stimulus package that helped to save this nation from the worst crisis financially in history. In the first 30 days, Trump has...
That's a number I'm never going to forget, Professor Smith. It went
Trump has done nothing.
From $10 trillion in national debt that we had when Obama took office, now we have $20 trillion, and nobody talks about those numbers. That was irresponsible, and that is something that we're going to have to pay with our future generation.
And we talk about saving the auto industry. We talk about the economy going up. We talk about the stock market going up.
The stock market has gone up to record levels since President Trump has been in office.
It was like 4,000 when Obama took office, and he doubled it. We talk about also the fact that the unemployment rate has gone down.
I agree with you. We have 12 million more people in food stamps now since President Obama took office. So those are numbers that are real numbers that we can argue about. I don't think people feel that are in a better position now than they were 8 years ago. I believe that this country needs radical change, and we're going to have radical change in the next 4 years with Trump.
Can I bring it back to this weekend just for a moment? There's so much attention on...
so good, though.
So much attention on the spending, and, President Trump, one of the first things he said is, we don't need a new Air Force One. I'm not spending that kind of money. Money-saving guy, but yet we saw Air Force One go from Palm Beach to Melbourne.
44-minute flight.
44-minute flight, and there's been a lot of attention on how much the president's family is spending on security, seeing as they don't really live in the White House full-time. Is that a fair question?
Well, he also told the Washington Post that the White House told the Washington Post that they were not going to use Air Force One as a prop at this rally.
Right, but didn't they roll
there
it
it
up
was
there?
rolling in
as a prop at the rally.
With this beautiful sunset, and it's great TV. and you have the song from the Air Force One movie playing in the background. But, you know, saying one thing, doing another without a whole lot of transparency about it is always going to raise questions for people like the press. And Michael is right. The president doesn't have an opponent right now. And he was certainly critiquing, you know, judges and Democrats and the media because he needs someone to fight against. He needs a foil. And, you know, the media has long been a foil for politicians and hooray for adversarial reporters. But when Obama went out of Washington to campaign, right, in his first few weeks in office, because he did that, it was to push the stimulus. There was a specific legislative goal to accomplish from that meeting. I'm not sure what this rally was trying to accomplish other than to get the president back in his comfort zone after a few rough weeks in office.
I think, to say the obvious, he had had a very difficult couple of weeks and he wanted a little adulation, and it looks like he got it. All right, hold your thoughts, everybody. We're going to talk about fake news and the news media and the president when we come back with a roundtable. Stay with us. Come back once again on the Sunday morning. We are in the midst of a robust roundtable. They usually are. H.T. Smith, the president, late Friday afternoon, sent out this tweet. It said, "The fake news media, failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people."
Well, first of all, let me say that America's democracy needs a creative tension between the press and the president.
Right.
It's the responsibility of the press to hold the president to transparency, integrity, and accountability. But it's also the president's right to push back on false news, on inaccurate news, and news that endangers the security of the country. So fake news, I don't like it, but I think that's fair game. The press are big boys and big girls with a lot of computers and a lot of ink. Right. I think things that they're not good people, all that's fair. But enemies of the people is language straight out of the book of dictators. It started with Nero and the Roman Empire back in 68 AD to Stalin, Mao Zedong. And then I came across this and I wrote it down because I want to get this right.
Okay.
This is what the propagandist Goebbels for Hitler said.
Yeah.
And every time I read the word Jews, put the word press. The article is entitled, "The Jews Are Guilty. If someone wears the yellow Jewish star, he is an, quote, enemy of the people, end quote. Jews are a parasitic race that feeds like a foul fungus on the cultures of healthy but ignorant peoples. This is only one effective measure. Cut them out." Donald Trump and his administration can fight the press, but that language right out of the playbook of dictators should never be spoken ever again by any leader in his administration.
And is it worrisome that there are people on the street as we speak, and I think as journalists we've probably met them, Mary Lee, who spit things like that back at least our local press contingent is not among them?
I mean, I find it just simply awful that you would quote Hitler and try to put in the same playing field what was said about the Jewish people and the Holocaust with something that Donald Trump has said about the media. The media did not act properly during his campaign. He's angry about some of the media, rightly so. I believe the media is going to become better at doing their job and being more careful with their words because he's putting them on the spot. He's free to say whatever he wants against the media. My parents come from Cuba where they have one media outlet. Venezuela is controlling the media. This does not even, he's not in any way attempting to control the media. He's just saying, do your job and do it better.
And all I'm saying is that he's using the exact same word.
He is not using the same words, Professor Smith. He is
enemy
not.
of the people. The exact same words. I see the handwriting and the DNA of Steve Bannon, a white supremacist. Donald Trump didn't write these words. This is Bannon.
Yeah.
Donald Trump knows what the words say. He doesn't know what they mean, and he doesn't know they come from there. And even Marilee, you and I should say to this president, the president of all the United States, you can bash the media. That's fair.
Right.
But not use these words. Don't use the words that Hitler used. Don't use the words that Mao Zedong and Lenin used. Don't use the words that Fidel used. Say they're fake news or anything else, but not these words.
Hetty, I'm reminded of a famous saying from a press critic, A.J. Liebling, who said, "The press is free as long as you own one."
I mean, you know, I think we struggle with this. As a big girl reporter.
Yes.
I don't need to be liked. You know, that doesn't really matter to us. But in terms of the broader issue for democracy, it's concerning to have a president who doesn't want to acknowledge the responsibilities and also the necessity of the Fourth Estate. However, if we just sit here and keep talking about it, we might just be propagating the problem, right? I mean, it's kind of what the president wants us to do, create an adversarial relationship as if the media were his opponent, and we are not. We are just going to check whoever is in power.
But there were people in the media, Patty, that were his opponent. There's a leading Spanish anchor in this town that did campaign against Trump. He was clearly in Hillary's side, and he was every night in the news and the largest Spanish media
There's advocacy
campaign.
journalists on both sides, and I'm not going to sit here and talk about the merits of different types of journalism.
No, but what I'm saying that there were some.
But the point is, it exists on both sides, and when you need a straw man, you put up the media. That's what politicians have done from time immemorial.
But you don't have a choice but to fight. You're in a fight. When I went to Vietnam, I didn't.
I don't look at it as being in a fight. I'm doing my job. We are doing our jobs. We report the facts, and that's what we do.
And that's your side of the facts. In other words, he's fighting the facts that you are reporting about what he says, what he tweets, and what he does. That's the way you fight. Not calling him names, but just continuing to report and not ever backing up from doing your job. That's how you fight, and that's how you've been fighting, and I'm proud of it.
HT, thank you. That's going to be the final word.
No, we can keep going.
Well, maybe we will after the show, but for right now, that's going to be it. But thank you all for a really great roundtable. All right, after the break, Local 10 sits down with the outgoing U.S. Attorney, Wilfredo Ferrer, great guy. We'll talk with him after the break.
Just days before President Trump nominated FIU law dean Alex Acosta for labor secretary, the current U.S. attorney who had succeeded Acosta at that Miami office announced his resignation.
Wilfredo Ferrer was nominated to be the U.S. attorney here in 2010 by President Obama. By all accounts, by my account, he has done a commendable job, great job, but his tenure had to end with the election of Donald Trump. Carlos Suarez sat down with Willie Ferrer late this week.
After 7 years presiding over 11,000 indictments, U.S. Attorney Wilfredo Ferrer is getting ready for the next chapter in his life. Inside his office in downtown Miami, Ferrer said the time had come for him to go.
I had not been sort of contacted by anybody in the new administration, so I just figured that the timing was right. And after 7 years in anticipation of a transition, I thought it would be best to sort of take the step now.
Ferrer, the son of Cuban immigrants, graduated top of his class at Hialeah, Miami Lakes. He went on to the University of Miami and later the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned a law degree.
These fraudsters have no shame.
Ferrer leads the third largest U.S. Attorney's office in the country, a tenure that included prosecuting healthcare fraud, identity theft, and financial crimes, including Scott Rothstein's $1.2 billion Ponzi scheme. His office made up part of the indictment against drug lord El Chapo Guzman.
We've made a big difference, in healthcare fraud, identity theft. These are areas where, unfortunately, we lead the nation in those types of crimes. And we have done a lot through our task forces and through our partnerships.
Pete the cat. I love my white shoes.
Ferrer's dedication went beyond the courtroom. His pre-K reading program put prosecutors and volunteers in classrooms across South Florida with scores of books given out at each event.
We have shown this community that we're not just prosecutors who put people in jail, but we want to be part of the solution to the violence issues. And we are now reaching out to more than 1,200 students a month. We started a reading program because I realized that more than half of our inmates in our federal jails cannot read. And statistics show that if a child does not read by the 3rd grade at their level, 50% chance that they'll end up in the criminal justice system.
Ferrer's departure did not come as a surprise. The office is a political appointment, and the Trump administration made clear it would replace top prosecutors across the country. He leaves at a time where the debate over immigration has meant a public and at times very personal fight between the White House and Justice Department.
My parents came to this country with nothing, with one suitcase, and the fact that one of their sons was able to be nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate, by just going to public education, working hard, That is the message that I want people to know as they see all this politics play out in the big screen. Never to lose focus on just what you can do individually. As a son of immigrants, to stand up in court and say, my name is Wilfredo Ferrer and I represent the United States of America, means more to me than you know.
Ferrer will leave his post on March 3rd. He says he expects to continue his reading program outreach. As for what's next, he says he is going to take some time off and then expects to return to the private sector. Reporting in the newsroom, I'm Carlos Suarez for This Week in South Florida.
And after March 3rd, the top assistant, Ben Greenberg, in that office takes over as acting U.S. Attorney on the 4th.
We wish Mr. Greenberg well and thank Willie Ferrer for being a terrific public servant. Still to come, my personal perspective about the president and the press. Where did this relationship go so wrong?
All right, South Florida, welcome back. From some nice conditions, but we are warming up rather quickly. Already 87 degrees in the Kendall area, 82 in Miami. I think we are going to be flirting with near record heat in Miami again as we soar into the mid-80s. We've been dry so far, but we are seeing a few showers popping up now across extreme southern Miami-Dade County. We're going to keep it warm, but we're also going to keep that chance of isolated showers in the forecast into the afternoon. Michael?
Erica, thanks. All right, before we leave you this morning, a personal perspective about the president and the press. Boy, could this relationship get any worse? Apparently not. Here is the tweet the president sent out late Friday afternoon. The fake news media, failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC News, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people. Wow. That's just plain ludicrous. The news media, especially the ones named by the president, are not the enemy of the American people. They and we are the American people, your neighbors, and once in a while, your friends. Our enemy is Islamic State and Al-Qaeda and any foreign power or domestic terrorist who seeks to do us harm. I'm talking about people who hijack commercial planes and fly them into buildings. Those are our enemies. The press is the adversary of elected officials, and that's our proper role. If there's any rationale at all for the press, it is to hold accountable people in positions of public trust. Everyone from your local city councilman to the county commissioner, state lawmakers, the members of Congress, and yes, whoever occupies the White House. President Trump is hardly the first president to complain about being badly treated by the press. I'm sure George Washington had a few complaints too. So has every president who has held the office. But President Trump's complaints are of a different order. He is obsessed with the way he is portrayed on radio, TV, newspapers. Now, true, he has been skewered during his first months in office, but they've been rocky, tumultuous, chaotic, even scary. I don't blame the president for getting upset, but the way to blunt that criticism is to stop obsessing about the dishonest media and start governing. The president says this coming week he's going to unveil a new and hopefully improved executive order on immigration. Good, let's see it. And next month he says he will roll out a replacement plan for Obamacare. Great, let's see what he's got. Same goes for tax reform, a strategy to take on Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. Now, those are the things Americans care about, and that's what the president needs to start concentrating on. Donald Trump scores big points with his base whenever he bashes the dishonest media, but the media shouldn't be the story here. The current crisis of confidence is not about us, and the president should stop trying to turn us into the enemy. Mr. President, just start doing the job you were elected to do. Call off the war with the media, and one other thing, stop watching so much cable news, please. That is my perspective. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday, a great holiday, and we're glad you were with us.
As always, we would love to hear from you. Here are all of the addresses where you could find us. We love hearing what you think about any topic in the news. Thanks for being with us.
Stay informed, get involved.
Bye.